and just, I made some roasted vegetables and I made the mistake of putting in a jalapeno, very mild pepper. But man, when I got in there, when I was roasting, wow, got hot.
This will time out after about 28 minutes.
Pardon me?
This will time out
Oh,
about
okay.
after 28 minutes.
Yeah, good, you have to speak up for me.
So usually we try to get everything
Okay.
done by then. Now what I'm going to do is put this close to your mouth.
Okay.
So I'll put it right there.
Oh,
And you're going to have to speak up so that I can
okay,
get it recorded.
alrighty.
So go ahead and, where were you born, what year, so forth?
Well, I was born in 1942 in St. Paul, Minnesota. My father was in the Army at the time, and my mom decided that she wanted to be where he was, and she couldn't take me with her, so for the first 2.5 years, I lived with my grandparents in Minnesota. And then I moved to New Jersey, where I grew up. I lived there till I was 21. We lived in a very small town. We could run all day and nobody worried about us, and we had lakes to swim in the summertime, and it was pretty ideal place to be until you became a teenager, and then there was nothing for us to do.
Yeah, when you're a small kid, the
Yeah.
whole world is wonderful.
Right. And the day lasted forever, and one of my fondest memories was in the fall. We had so many oak trees around, or maple and oak trees, that the trees turned these beautiful colors. They were red and orange and gold, and when the leaves fell, I mean, we would have we could have 2 feet of leaves in our yards and on the roads and everything. And I just remember for going for walks on sandy roads and just all the leaves around and the smell. And I can still get homesick when I think about that. I really enjoyed the falls, even as a young kid. But,
What city was that, New Jersey?
it was called Browns Mills, New Jersey. It was south of Trenton. We were right next to Fort Dix, which was an Army post, and then McGuire Air Force Base. So I grew up going to school with every mix, every combination there ever was. And so...
Was that where you went to high school?
Yes, I went to high school there.
What's the name of the high school?
The high school was Pemberton Township. It was a regional school because there were a lot of small towns around, and we all came together and, went to school there. So I graduated there, and then I immediately started working. My parents never talked about college, and neither did I, so I...
So when you were in high school, what subjects did you enjoy?
I enjoyed literature, biology, and history. Those are, and of course gym. I loved going down. Yeah. And
So with literature, what was your favorite author?
oh golly, there were so many that I have a lousy memory, so I don't. As I told you, I don't have.
Why don't you just pick something and tell me about it?
Okay.
It doesn't have to be your favorite, but just pick something.
Okay.
Somewhere.
Well, I can remember in literature class we were reading Julius Caesar, and I was very, very shy at that time. And so we're each given parts that we had to memorize, and then we had to act them out. And so I had to get up there, and I was supposed to be, oh gosh, I can't even remember who I was supposed to be, but it was the one that said, "We've come to bury Caesar, not to praise him."
Yeah, Brutus.
Yeah, Brutus. And I had this cloak that I had to whip off, and I mean, I was so dramatic, it scared me. And I know my teacher thought, my God, where did this come from? Because I was very quiet. And I had these 2 teachers that I just dearly loved. One was the literature teacher, and the other was the librarian. And they were the 2 Miss Burrs. They
The
lived,
what?
Burr was their last name.
B-U-R-R?
And they were spinsters.
Were they related?
Pardon me?
The two Miss Burrs, were they related?
They were sisters.
Sisters. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
they wore clothes that were totally out of style, during our time, because this was in the early 50s and 60s, and it was almost like they were caught in a time warp. But they were just.
What year did you graduate from high school?
Oh, I graduated in 1960. And I graduated by the skin of my teeth. I was not an A student, that's for sure.
Okay.
And then I started working as a receptionist in a hospital. And
what was the name of the hospital?
Deborah, it was called Deborah Sanatorium and Heart Hospital, and they were in this small town, but it was supported by Jewish organizations, and so it was my first experience with the outside world, really. I mean, because our town was pretty, I can't say it was isolated because we had a lot of military people there, but it was, for me, it was really interesting because I was meeting people from all over. Some very renowned heart specialists would come down and do surgery, and it started out as a TB sanatorium in the early years.
What were you tasked to do?
I was a receptionist, and I had one of those wonderful old PBX boxes where you had the cords and you had to put the number in, and I loved it. It was probably one of my favorite jobs, and so I got to know everybody. And I even had the opportunity to go and watch open heart surgery.
Oh,
I became friends with one of the OR nurses, and I was there when they took the saw and cut the person open. And
do they just cut down the sternum?
Yep, they cut down the sperm, and
how do they get the sternum back together? Do they sew it, or do they
I don't know because I wasn't there for that part. I got hungry and had to go
I'm
lunch.
always curious about
Yeah,
that.
I don't. They have to push it back together, and I'm sure they.
Well, yeah, they push it back. But
Yeah.
how does it stay in place? And you think
They must. I don't know, to tell you the truth, Marty. I never even thought about that. But it was, and at that time they had a operable heart and lung machine that took over the operation of the blood, and so the blood would go throughout with the machine. It was about the size of that wall. I mean, it was just fascinating. But anyhow, I worked there for a couple of years, and then I worked for the phone company for.
Oh. So your vast experience pushing the
Yeah. But
pins didn't qualify you to work for the phone company.
no, at the phone company was really, it was a neat job because Fort Dix was a recruiting base at that time, and so all of the young recruits, they were pretty isolated for the first 6 weeks, but then they were released and they all wanted to make phone calls.
Wow.
So it was in this big long kind of barracks-like building, and we sat up kind of up above, and they were all down below us, and we would direct them to the phones, and we'd give them the information or the change, because at that time you have change, and they come in by the hundreds. I mean, it was just massive young men that I could never talk to.
Let me do a little digression here.
Yeah.
This was 1960, and I know Elvis Presley was big between 56 and 60.
Yes, he came to Fort Dix, and I could have given a rip. He was not one of my. Pat Boone was my favorite.
Okay, that was my next question. Who was your heartthrob? Pat Boone, huh?
Pat Boone, Everly Brothers, things like that.
Everly Brothers, okay.
And anyhow, when I was working, and one of my girlfriends from school and I got together, and we started cruising around. At that time, I had a '56 Thunderbird. It was a wonderful car.
Those are great cars.
Yeah, it was. And so here are these two young gals running all over the countryside in this neat car. And we discovered that we liked dancing, but we couldn't go into any of the clubs, bars, they weren't clubs, because we were underage.
You were 17?
I was 18, 19 during this.
You got to be, 21?
Yeah, you had to be 21.
21, okay.
Yeah. And so somebody made me a false ID card, And so she had.
Time out. Can I say that?
Yeah, I don't care.
Okay, I always
Yeah.
check.
Oh no, I mean, hey, this was.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
And the town I grew up in had 13 bars. So what else was a young girl to do? We went dancing 4 or 5 nights a week.
Wow.
And sometimes we'd close the bars, go home, go to bed, get up the next morning, go to work. You know, it was just.
Well, you had energy to burn.
Yeah. And then unfortunately, my mother died when I was 19. And she had been seriously ill for off and on for several years. And I have a brother who was 16 at the time and another one that was 14. And then I had my sister, Kathy, who was 4. So I became more or less the head of the household at that time. And I look back at it and I think.
So you were living at home while you were working? You were still living at home while you were working?
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Just check.
So like I said, I became the head of the household. And one night in one of our carousing around at one of the bars, this young man was sitting across the bar from me, who I hadn't even noticed, but he got up. And when he got up, I swear he had an invisible sign on him that said, "I'm ready to get married. I'm ready to get married." He's coming around at the side of the bar, and I thought, oh heck, you know. And he came over and asked me to dance, and eventually we got married. But at the time,
You eventually got married, and you were forewarned.
But you know, I just knew. That's, I don't know why, but anyhow. So we were married for 34 years. He was in the Air Force.
What was his name?
Will was his name.
Will.
And he was from Idaho, and I was from New Jersey, and boy, there was a big difference between us. I mean, really. But anyhow,
Was he a hick?
Yeah, he was, but he was very smart. He had his BA in electrical engineering.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He went to the University of Idaho, which was in Moscow, Idaho. But anyhow, we married. We went to Germany less than, I think, 6 months after we were married, and I was there for 2.5 years. My first son was born there in Wiesbaden, Germany.
What was your first son's name?
Is Michael.
Michael, okay.
And he lives in Washington State. And my second son was born a year later, and I decided to come back to the States to have him because my husband was going to be gone for 6 months. So.
Okay, Will, was he in the military?
Yeah, he was in the Air Force.
Air Force.
Yeah, he was a navigator in the Air Force. And we came back to the States, and my son Dwayne was born. He passed away 2 years ago. He was 47 at the time. And then my daughter Lisa was born.
He was 47 2 years ago?
Yeah, he was older than that. Michael was already 52, so he was 50, just a little over 50 when he was. And then, where was Lisa born? Oh, and then when my husband came home from Germany, he had applied to the Air Force to go back for his master's degree, and they sent him to Purdue in Illinois. Purdue is where? Anyhow, he went back to school and got his master's. He got his master's, and I had another baby. So
he got his master's, and
you got a baby.
Got the baby.
Yeah, and I was very nice. I delivered Lisa on the weekend between final exams, so he was very pleased about that. And then when he finished there, we went to Japan for 3 years. And then from Japan, we went to California for 3 years. That was our nicest assignment because was a liaison between the Air Force and the civilian.
Where in California?
And it was at Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Vandenberg,
Yeah,
okay.
where they shoot off. In fact, they just shot a rocket off from there.
All right.
Yeah, we got to see several go. Anyhow, so we were there for 3 years, and then we went to Washington State, and he retired from the Air Force in '75, and we continued to stay there. He died in 2000. On April 15th, he hated paying taxes, so he bugged out. Anyhow, and then after that, I was on my own.
Okay, how many years, or what was it, what year did he die?
He died in 2000.
2000?
Yeah, 2000,
So you were married for how long? How many years?
We were married for 34 years.
34 years? 34 years.
And then
I'm trying to,
Yeah.
I want to ask a couple of questions about,
Sure.
about culture a little bit.
okay,
So, where were you in 1964?
1964, I was in Germany. I married in 1964. And so we went to Germany in
Okay.
1964. Yeah.
Because the Beatles were all the rage, and I know they toured Germany before they came
Yeah,
to the
we
US.
didn't. I didn't see them there.
You didn't see,
No.
okay.
And it wouldn't have mattered to me anyhow. Like I said, I didn't care for
Were you into rock and roll at all at that,
No.
64?
At that time, once we got married and we went overseas, it was, we were in a, we weren't, it's really hard to explain. When you're living in a foreign country, usually your only source of information is the radio, the Armed Forces radio.
Okay, so it was very limited.
Yeah, we were kind of in a bubble.
Okay. So in '67, the Summer of Love and the hippies, and you missed all that.
Yeah, I did,
Damn.
which is kind of, I mean, yeah, and he was an officer, and we were.
I went up to Haight-Ashbury the following
did
year
you?
just to check it out.
Oh gosh. Well, you know, my girlfriend and I, the one I caroused her out with, Judy, we didn't even know about what was the big one on the East Coast?
Oh, Woodstock, yeah.
Yeah, Woodstock. But we were like 4 hours away from Woodstock, and we didn't know anything about it until after it was over. I mean, the town we lived in was, you know, just.
I think that was Bethel, New York.
Yeah, I thought it was Pennsylvania. Was it Pennsylvania or New York?
I think it was New York.
I can't remember. So.
So all the upheaval and everything, you were in Germany for.
Yeah.
So
And
you were in that little bubble.
And then when Will was at Purdue, we didn't hear a whole lot about what was going. We didn't have a television. We went without a television for years because I just didn't. Well, we were overseas a lot of the time, and
Okay.
so at Purdue, it's more of like an engineering, ag type of place, and everybody was so busy studying, we didn't know anything about it. But they had one riot when we were there.
Oh.
And Will said, oh, there were probably about 50 to 100 people there. It was no big deal. So,
So you were a stay-at-home mom?
oh yeah, well, I had 3 children in 2.5 years, so.
Okay, so basically,
Yeah.
after you got married, you were
Yeah.
a stay-at-home mom.
And at that time, the military discouraged officers' wives from working.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a profession, so there was no really any
No
need
reason
to. Yeah. And then let's see, we lived in we were in Washington State.
So what city? What city?
I lived in Lakewood, which was right outside of the air base, which is, why don't I remember the name of the air base? It's not McGuire. McCord.
McCord?
Yeah. Will was at McCord, and he retired from there and then went to work for Boeing.
Oh.
And then a year after he died, I was out at a bar dancing with my girlfriend, another girlfriend.
Excuse me. Oh, what did he die of?
He died of lung cancer.
Lung cancer. Did he smoke?
He smoked.
You think that might have been?
Of course it was. Of course.
Maybe the reason?
Yeah. No,
Can
definitely.
I say that? Is that?
Yeah.
Hopefully it might warn now. Hopefully it'll be a warning to people that want to take up
Well,
smoking.
people here are it's too late. They're smoking.
It was geriatrics that want to take up smoking.
Yeah. Well, the ironic thing was he didn't start smoking until he was 21 because they couldn't afford it.
Wow.
He came from a very poor background. But anyhow,
So how old was he when he died?
he was, oh, he was 62. No, he was 63 because he collected Social Security for 1 year
Gotcha.
and then passed away.
When I see people smoking nowadays, I say, "You're committing suicide."
Of course.
You know, so I tell them that, and they look at me like, "Oh yeah, I can stop when I want to." No, you can't.
Yeah.
I know so many people who can't stop.
I don't understand it. Well, although, I can't drink coffee because it bothers it's serious, it really bothers me. But I crave it all the time. So I mean, I understand that.
Oh yeah.
That feeling.
I love coffee. I had a cup today and I go, yeah.
Every once in a while, for a special occasion, I'll have a cup of coffee.
Well, you know, the funny thing is I found this liqueur.
Mm-hmm.
It's hazelnut,
Oh, yeah.
and I put that little bit of that in there.
Mm-hmm.
God, it makes it taste so much better. Wow.
Well, my neighbor across the street, he makes a wonderful Irish coffee. And so I have that every now and then.
All right.
But anyhow. And then again, I said I was out dancing.
So you went back to your dancing?
Yeah, in fact, after Will died, I started taking dance lessons because it's been so many years since I had done it. And I realized, oh, I love this.
So, excuse me, so who'd you dance with? Or do you have now a new
Well, at the
crowd?
time, I wasn't dancing with anybody. I was dancing with instructors, and because I was taking classes.
Uh-huh.
And I heard that they were going to be having a big band type of, and that's the type of music that we were dancing to. So I drug her along because I would not go into a bar by myself.
This was year 2000.
2001.
2001,
Mm-hmm.
and you were dancing with the big band.
Yes. And then I saw this fellow doing the rumba. He had his back to me, and I thought, wow, I'd like to dance with that man. And I told my friend that. Well, a few minutes later, Caesar trots over to our table, and he asked her to dance. And I thought, oh, geez. They always like the blondes, the tall blondes, but I realized...
So you were a brunette?
Yeah, I was a brunette. I was redhead at that time, actually.
Oh, redhead?
Yeah. And so I just kind of chuckled. I thought, she can't dance. I can dance, she can't. So lo and behold, he was just getting information about me. And then he asked me.
Oh, he was.
He was doing a reconnoiter.
Ah.
Yeah. And so that's how we met. And
That's interesting.
yeah.
So your perception paid off as it did previous.
Yeah. So I'm not going to any bars again because I don't want to get hooked up with anybody. So, and the ironic thing is I don't drink. You know, I'm a social sipper. But the funny thing was, he came to sit with us. Are we done? Oh, we're off.
Oh, yeah.
He came over to sit with us, and he looked at us, and we were drinking beer. God only knows why I was drinking beer, because I'm not, anyhow. And I had asked the waitress for a glass, but she left, and she didn't hear me. So he looked at us and he said, "What are two classy broads like you doing drinking beer out of a bottle?" And I knew I have met my match. And we were together for 18 years, and did a lot of traveling, and just
So together for 18 years, unmarried?
married 8 of those years.
So you were dating for 10 years?
We were living in sin for for that time, but
Can I say that they were living in
I
sin?
don't care. I mean, you know,
No, I mean, it's cool.
I mean,
I always do this just
yeah,
so that you don't
no.
get freaked out. You know, you see.
so, you know, and then
What year were you married?
Hmm?
In what year were you married?
Oh dear. I have to go look at the picture. I can't remember.
Just
Neither
guess.
one of us can remember.
Just guess. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
I mean,
You did it
well,
after
9 years ago. What would 9 years ago?
9 years ago?
Yeah, 10 years ago.
2010.
Yeah, okay. 2010 or 2011, I can't remember which. Maybe it was 2011, and the date was the 19th of October, I think. The funny thing is, neither Caesar or I would remember the date. It was like we'd been together forever. But anyhow, so I did a lot of things in between those moves and such, but moving from one part of the country to the next, or moving out of the country, takes a lot of energy and time.
Where did you guys settle down?
Caesar and I?
Yeah.
We never settled down until we got here.
Oh, so you were always on the go.
Yeah, I think we moved at least 5 times, and well, we decided. Caesar had already been going down to Yuma, Arizona before I met him, and so I went down with him one year for a 2-week period, and it was in the wintertime, and the sun was shining every day. I couldn't believe it, because in Washington State at that time, in the wintertime, you didn't get a lot of sun. It was cold and damp.
Yuma holds the world's record. Yuma holds the world's record for most days of sunshine a year.
Well, I believe it. I believe it. And so I fell in love with the area just because the sun was shining. So I went home and I got so depressed. I called Caesar and said, I am so depressed. And this was at Christmas time, the
yeah,
time of the
you think.
Yeah, but I said, and so he came
You went
up.
home to Washington?
Yeah, this is in Washington, and so he flew back home, and after that we never went anywhere without one another. I mean, it was just a comfortable fit. We were both from the East Coast, and we were both military, exposed to the military. So I say we spoke 3 languages. We spoke East Coast and we spoke military, and even though there was 17 years between us in age, it never got in the way.
This is going to time out in a minute or two here. I'm just keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, just about done. And you mean, I did lots of things, in places that I live, but just moving around.
So what about Caesar do you like the best?
Oh, let's see. What about Caesar? Caesar's Caesar's a Renaissance man. There's so many things to like about him. Our politics were alike. We had the same faith.
That's good. Politics.
Yeah, and well, we both loved to dance.
Both love to dance.
We both
you had both military background.
Right. Yeah. So we had a lot in common. And he and my first husband, worked for Boeing, worked for aerospace.
Oh.
In fact, they worked on a project.
And he worked for Lockheed, right?
No, Boeing. Well, actually, Caesar worked for all of the major
okay. Because I thought he worked at some point.
Pardon me?
Lockheed. I think he gave me a photo of Lockheed.
Oh, yeah. But he worked for all of them. I think we're done, aren't we? Oh, 28? Is it 28 minutes? Oh, and he loved to cook.
Oh, yeah.
So he did all of our cooking.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
that was a real catch, wasn't it?
Yeah, so when I met him, I was underweight. And after about 5 years, I had to start, well, you don't have to put that in there, watching my weight because of his cooking.
Well, I just say, because you were so well fed, you had to start watching your weight.
Right, yeah, definitely.
I'll state it diplomatically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what year did you move into Leisureland?
When what?
In what year did you move into Leisureland?
Oh, I think it was around 05 or 06.
Okay.
Because we lived in, we would come over here, and my first experience with San Diego, it must have been in the wintertime, because it was very chilly and miserable, and I didn't enjoy it at all. And then
Yeah, especially coming from Yuma, right?
yeah, and then finally one year we came over in the wintertime it was beautiful. And I thought, oh,
Okay, Tanner.
this is what people talk about, being in San